Anatomy of a Phenomena, a social studies report for grade 10 by Lloyd and WSJ. In the 1890s, a veritable reign of terror occurred in the historic part of town, when residents were subjected to a strange series of nocturnal assaults and frights. In 1893, a young woman berry-picking in the woods near the Hog's Back Ridge was startled when she stumbled across the naked body of a young man hidden amidst the shrubbery. She ran shrieking for help and was soon joined by a search party of men who had accompanied the expedition. Beating the bushes, they found an empty bottle of rye whiskey and what appeared to be the outline of a body in the soft earth. A few minutes later, a fey young man named Mahan, fully clothed, was found hiding in the nearby trees. While unable to explain what he was doing in the woods, the authorities eventually had to let him go. After all, the witness had never seen a face, just a naked torso. Later that same year, an elderly woman, who had stayed late while visiting the grave of her recently deceased husband, was startled by the sudden appearance of a swarm of skeleton heads, which came keening out of the darkness to land on her husband's newly dug grave, as though trying to get at the body underneath the soil. The distressed woman tried to drive them away by crying out and waving her arms, only to have a pair of the floating heads attack her, one of them biting her on one of her hands, which later became seriously infected. She managed to stagger to a nearby farmhouse before passing out. A search party sent to investigate found no sign of the skeleton heads, but noticed the soil of the husband's grave did appear to have been disturbed. The old lady described the floating heads as having dark, ugly, pock-marked faces with long, unkempt hair. In the summer of 1897, a young girl by the name of Allard woke up in the middle of the night to find the face of an ugly, pock-marked man, minus a body, looming over her as she slept. Terrified, she woke the household with her screams. A quick search of house and grounds revealed nothing, but the young woman insisted it wasn't a nightmare. She was most disturbed by the apparition's glowing red eyes and actually fell ill with a severe rash, from which she eventually recovered. But she stopped sleeping with her windows open. Stories of further incidents involving headless bodies and floating heads appear periodically throughout the years preceding and following the First World War, but they were generally squibs poking fun at the credulity of the lower peasant classes. Most of the reports centered on the Valley of the 16 or the rustic village of Palermo. A more serious incident occurred in 1926, when a McLaughlin Buick swerved off Dunn Street in downtown Oakville and careened over the edge of the valley to end up in the creek 50 feet below. As the four-door automobile disappeared under 10 feet of water, the rear bumper, complete with spare tire, sticking out above the surface, the driver, Dudley McWilliams, swam to a nearby island from which he was rescued by rowboat. McWilliams was immediately taken to the police station for questioning, it being assumed that the accident might be the result of intoxication. But the young man, a 25-year-old McMaster divinity student, claimed the crash resulted from having to take evasive action after a large white spherical object was thrown or came rushing towards his windshield, forcing him to swerve to avoid a collision, but propelling him over the side of the ridge. The young man did make a jocular reference to the local belief in flying heads, but his suggestion, if meant seriously, was rejected out of hand by the skeptical authorities. McWilliams was not charged, but it was several months before the McLaughlin, which had become something of a local tourist attraction, was dredged from the creek. This report to be continued.